Jurassic Park was one of the most exciting films ever made. It had everything from a theme park full of deadly dinosaurs to scientists playing God and even Jeff Goldblum. No surprise that this movie spawned not just 5 sequels, but also decades worth of rumors about us bringing dinosaurs back to life. But what if these rumors aren't just that? What if they're true? Could we actually make our own Jurassic Park today? Well, as with a lot of things that were considered science fiction 30 years ago, the answer is kind of... You see, the premise of Jurassic Park was that paleontologists could recover dinosaur DNA from preserved fossils, clone those dinosaurs, and then sell their stock in a new theme park. Today, we know that the last part of that definitely wouldn't be allowed to happen, at least not until the animatronics got some serious upgrades. But what about the first 2 parts? Well, let's start at the beginning. The very first step towards making Jurassic Park would be finding some dinosaur DNA, which sounds harder than it actually is. See, while it is obviously much more difficult to find preserved DNA, the further back in time you go, the chances of finding viable dinosaur DNA from the Jurassic period are pretty slim. Instead, the more likely source for Jurassic Park's geneticists would be something like preserved feathers or skin cells, which could still contain usable genetic material even after millions of years. That's because, unlike bones, soft tissue can preserve in places like amber, which makes it possible to extract ancient DNA. We've actually been able to do this recently. In 2020, scientists successfully extracted DNA from a mosquito trapped in 99 million rolled amber from the Dominican Republic. And while there's no actual evidence of any dinosaurs in the area during the Cretaceous period, the presence of bird DNA suggests that the area was once home to birds. More proof that dinosaurs weren't so different from us regular folks, just like getting old. But while extracting ancient DNA may not be as hard as you might think, using that DNA to bring back a Jurassic monster is... The reason why it's so hard to bring back dinosaurs like the ones depicted in Jurassic Park isn't necessarily because of how old their remains are, but because of how complex they are. There's a reason why cloning Dolly the sheep was such a big deal. Even though Dolly wasn't brought back from anything more recent than a fresh sample of lamb DNA, the process of removing an unfertilized egg cell from a sheep and planting it into a surrogate mother and hoping for the best was still extremely difficult and took years of work. And dinosaurs present an even bigger challenge than that because they don't have any close living relatives. They're so different from other animals that they simply can't serve as surrogate parents. If you wanted to clone a dinosaur, you would essentially need to find a suitable host species that's closely related enough to carry a dinosaur fetus to term, but not so closely related that it would reject the fetus as a foreign invader. And with no living dinosaurs to base our search off of, we have no idea what kind of animal could fulfill this role. So what's the solution? Well, one proposed solution has been to use a relative of the frog called the African clawed frog. These frogs can reproduce both sexually and asexually, meaning that by selectively breeding them over many generations, it should be possible to get one that only contains one set of chromosomes. This means that instead of having 2 sets of paired chromosomes, one from each parent, this frog would effectively have a set of chromosomes that could be split up and used to create a viable embryo. This could be done by inserting dinosaur DNA into the frog's egg cell and then artificially fertilizing it. Since the frog already only has one set of chromosomes, the inserted dinosaur DNA could form a complete set without disrupting the genetic balance of the cell. It sounds easy. So where's the catch? Well, while this method does technically allow for a single individual to pass on its genetic information without needing a mate, doing it to an extent where it could produce offspring is a whole other ballgame. We haven't been able to do this with frogs yet, never mind dinosaurs. And the further removed a species is from being a viable candidate, the harder it will be. Still, the fact that it's been suggested means that scientists are seriously considering the possibility of a Jurassic Park. But even if we managed to clone a dinosaur, we would need to keep it alive. To figure out how to do that, let's turn our attention to another major player in the Jurassic Park equation, paleontology. One of the most important lessons we've learned since the original Jurassic Park came out is that dinosaurs weren't just gigantic lizard monsters. In fact, some of them were probably pretty cute. Thanks to the fossil record, we now know that hadrosaurs were actually duck-billed herbivores, and that many other dinosaurs were covered in feathers. This is a far cry from the scaly reptilian monsters that Hollywood has led us to believe. More importantly, it gives us a better idea of what a cloned dinosaur would need to survive. The biggest problem here is food. While your average raptor might look a lot like the vicious killers portrayed in the Jurassic Park movies, they actually would have looked more like turkeys if they had wings. This means that if we were to bring back raptors today, we would need to find a way to feed them. Either by creating massive enclosed habitats filled with their favorite plants, or by genetically modifying a fast-growing plant to taste exactly like their favorite prehistoric snacks. Even if we solved that problem, though, we would still need to consider the problem of size. Dinosaurs roamed the Earth during a time when the atmosphere had much higher oxygen levels than it does today. With more oxygen in the air, dinosaurs could grow much larger than modern animals without suffocating. But that also means that reintroducing dinosaurs to our oxygen-poor, modern atmosphere could potentially be fatal for them. Scientists aren't entirely sure what the effects of low oxygen would be on dinosaurs. But it could mean that we would either need to increase the amount of oxygen in the air, or keep dinosaurs confined to special habitats for the rest of human history. But even if we figured out how to increase oxygen levels and design a habitat that meets all of a dinosaur's needs, we still need to figure out how to put that dinosaur in the habitat. As anyone who's seen the original Jurassic Park knows, the moment you introduce dinosaurs to an environment where they don't belong, they tend to cause a lot of chaos. The same could be said for introducing them into our world today. For example, if a dinosaur were to escape its enclosure, it could have devastating consequences for local ecosystems. A group of researchers from the University of Oxford modeled the impact of escaped dinosaurs on modern ecosystems and found that, depending on the species, a herd of 20 sauropods could cause catastrophic damage to a local ecosystem, completely wiping out some native species and drastically altering the behavior of others. In other words, if a dinosaur got loose today, it would kick off a chain reaction that could threaten entire species, which doesn't sound like the kind of thing that would get approval from any governing body anywhere. Finally, let's not forget the biggest reason why a real-life Jurassic Park would never happen: cost. Between funding intensive research, building sprawling facilities, and paying top-tier scientists, it would take billions of dollars to make the dream of Jurassic Park a reality. And that's before we even got to the part where we needed to convince governments around the world to allow us to play. God. So while it is certainly possible that scientists could make a Jurassic Park, it would require decades of research and billions of dollars. Not to mention, it would also require us to learn how to clone dinosaurs, prevent them from destroying the environment, and somehow convince Jeff Goldblum to come back. In short, it would be a lot of work. And as rewarding as it would be to see a velociraptor for ourselves, it's probably better that we leave that to the movies. Now you're probably wondering what happens to the dinosaurs once they're cloned. And if you want to find out, you can watch this video about dinosaur extinction theories. Or if you'd rather watch something else, we have a whole site full of amazing science videos.